Welcome to the live chat. Remember to be on your best behavior. Phoenix Aurora, welcome. How are you? In this video, I'm going to be doing a little bit of astrology. Initially, when I thought to go live, it was to talk about the moon in Gemini. So come on in, have a virtual seat wherever you want to. I'm holding my microphone like this because I broke it. Bada bop. And so this is what we got. If you're over here on TikTok, come on over here to YouTube because I'm getting ready to do a little bit of astrology for a good time, not a long time. Um, if you're over here on YouTube, say what's up. I want to see if I can see the chat. I don't see the chat. I don't know how to. Or I'm learning. I don't want to say I don't know how to. I want to say I'm learning. I'm on a quest. Millie, come on over to YouTube if you'd like. I'm going to be hanging up this live over here. Appendix removed? No. I hope you're doing well with the appendix removal. Lots of fluid and rest for you. Is everyone over here on TikTok familiar with my YouTube channel? Let me know because I'm going to shut this down. Or maybe I'll keep it up. Why shut it down? Why not do a dual live simultaneously? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the moon in Gemini. I just did a awesome exercise for myself. Um, I'm already live. Go there and listen. Come on over here and listen. I did an awesome exercise of looking at my own astrological chart. For those that are interested in learning astrology, a starting point. This is a gem, a jewel, a diamond. If you're just starting astrology, you're going to want to learn your chart. And when I say learn your chart, I'm talking about the planetary stations and the degrees by arc minute and arc second. By degree and arc second. Degree, arc minute, and arc second. Degree and arc minute is a requirement when you take my class. The arc second is a bonus. It would be a bonus. But I looked up my planets, degree, arc minute, and arc second again because I forgot the arc minute. I started getting the degrees, the degree. I know all of my degrees, but it's the arc minute. And the reason and the importance of that is when you get to doing progressions and start tinkering with the math a little bit more, you'll see that those arc minutes actually turn into days, months, and years, depending on what progression you're using. And we'll get into that in a later video. Phoenix, come on over to YouTube. Thank you so much for the compliment on the soothing voice. I've had people have shared that with me. The YouTube channel is Astrologer LLC. Look for the patch. Look for the patch. So, learning astrology, your own astrological chart. I wonder, is this the chat box here? Oh, the chat box is here. I have it. See it now. Good morning, Bad Millie. How are you? If you're over here on TikTok, come on over here to YouTube. I'm over on the tubular. Lips are looking a little crazy, so um, we're gonna want to put a little moistness on them. It's a fear of mine, being on social media with lips that are cracked and bleeding. I had a dream one time, but anyway, um, yeah, if you're learning astrology, it's your own astrological chart. I just did this dynamic experiment with myself. I'm always doing experiments on myself, thus the lab coat, right? And I looked at all of my planetary stations and I looked to see when, by hour, by day, month, year, hour, and minute, when the planets came back, including went all the way to Pluto, believe it or not. Even though I'm going to tell you, I did, do I have it? Can I tell you? Let me see if I can tell you one of my returns for Pluto, one of my returns involving Pluto. Because Pluto takes like 284 years to go around the zodiac, I think, approximately 20 times 12. 20 times 12 equals 248, like 248 years. However, my next Pluto return, just to give you perspective, let me see if I can give it to you. Can I give it to you? I'm still processing. Okay, yes. My Pluto, or where Pluto was when I was born, is going to come back to where it was when I was born on November 13th, 2225, which is interesting. And even though I'm not sure, I don't think I'm going to be alive unless I'm able to get into this new technology, freeze myself or something like that. But I did it. A part of me said to do it just to see what the chart looked like and what's ahead for me in regards to the Plutonian energy, because it's still significant from this point and where I am to that point. There's a growth and there's a development there. You see what I mean? And we'll get into that in another video. But I wanted to share that. It's exciting. It's probably wasn't exciting you hearing me talk about it as it is in my mind with me processing all the information that I've just done on myself for the last hour and a half, right? Um, Astrology takes time. I have taken the time to look at astrology and to really get into the depths of characteristics and attributes and archetypes and it's how the planets how words, action words, verbs are attached to zodiac signs, planets, and certain energies. And I've been doing it for so long that now when somebody says something, like, you can even test me. Look at someone put a word in the chat, an action word in the chat. Whatever action word. On TikTok, put an action word in the chat, verb in the chat, and I'll show you. But I've been doing that for so long that now my mind actually works. Run. So you say run, it makes me think of the fire signs. It makes me think of Aries. It makes me think of Mars, right? Right off the bat, right? So that's the way my mind, I've spent so much time, I've attached fly. Aphrodisiac said fly. That makes me think of Aquarius. It makes me think of Uranus. It makes me think of the air signs. Right, more so Aquarius because aeronautics and flight and planes and whatnot, right? Swim makes me think of a water sign, right? Because it's water naturally. And it could also be Mars because the action of swimming works with the muscles, depending on if in the Olympics, and competing, then we're going to utilize fire element, if you will. But and that's when you're first starting to learn astrology. That is um, not only your chart, but also the characteristics and the archetypes are important, and that's how you actually learn how to read the astrological chart is by looking at yourself first, and then um, comprehending the base, which is the planet signs and houses, and then you start practicing on people, everyone, every single person, naysayers, sayers, side sayers, upsayers, downsayers, soothsayers, all of the sayers. Upsayers, downsayers, you know, and you try it. I had someone the other day come into the TikTok live and they gave me their birthday and I shared some things with them and they were like, no, 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 no. And I used to get disappointed at that point when someone was like, no, after I've dealt with people or I've read people where I've got a series of yeses. But now, like, I get so excited when someone says, no, 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 you're completely wrong, buddy. You know, try another trade. You're back to the drawing board. Because I know that I'm getting ready to learn something, but they left the live and I'm thinking about them. Hopefully they come back and I get an opportunity. I think it's Sunflower. Sunflower, wherever you are, come back. I need you for learning, growth, and development. Um, but anywho, about the moon in Gemini briefly here. Excuse me. Let me get a little sip. Is it okay if I have a little sip of fluid? Oh, Millie, you were there. You remember. Dip like set. Now, there's two reasons why a person would dip. One, they have to go, or for two, the information was accurate and they didn't want to confess that the information was accurate, which is something that I've had before. Eagle Eyes, Grand Rising, come on over to YouTube. We're over here having a blast here. We're over here having an absolute blast on YouTube. Pardon me if I'm not paying attention to your comments on TikTok. Would our birthdays be off if we go on by the wrong calendar? No, it wouldn't be wrong. There's no wrong calendar. No such thing as a wrong calendar. It's a different starting point, but there's no wrong calendar. There's different starting points in the arc. Great question, though. All right, so with that being said, with this charting that I did on myself, I'm still doing a little more research on this. If someone would like to be a part of the experiment that I'm doing, let me know. Um, I'm not sure if my phone number is over here on YouTube to text me, but reach out, maybe one of my videos or something like that, somehow, some way, shape, or form. My website, tlcastrologer.com. The .com, you know, the .com, you heard of the .com for all things astrological. All right, so, ba-da-ba. Now, let's get into what we're going to talk about. That took 14 minutes. I'm working on my timing, and each and every live gets better. Put something in the comments over here on YouTube. I got to get used to this commentos over here on the tube. It's a little bit delayed, I think. I'm not sure. But I want to talk about the moon in Gemini a little bit. Any Geminis in here? TikTok Geminis? YouTube Geminis? Is anybody familiar with where Gemini is in their astrological chart? If so, that's great. You can listen in. If you're not, pay attention. I see an interesting contrast between the stellium that's taken place. No Gemini placements at all. You do have Gemini placements, though. You definitely have Gemini placements. You don't have any planets in Gemini, but Gemini is placed. You said no Gemini placements, but Gemini is placed, and it has an interpretation and a meaning to it. All right. If you're over here on TikTok, I'm over on YouTube, Lab Coat Astrology LLC, Lab Coat Astrologer LLC. Comments. Second house, Gemini. Yes, make comments. That's how you absorb information by commenting, asking questions. Gemini's in the second house. No, Gemini's in the third house. So if Gemini's in the third house, right, um, the third house characteristics apply and are applicable to you while the moon transits the third house. The third house has to do with Gemini, brothers, sisters, cousins, close relatives, also the mentality and the mindset, the mental aptitudes, the thoughts that come ever so swiftly on a moment by moment basis. They say in ancient astrology, they say that the third house is the day to day thoughts. Now, over the years of comprehending this thing, Gemini is not only the day to day thoughts, but it's also the moment by moment thought. Being more aware of and more sensitive and more nurturing to the thoughts that one has on a moment by moment basis. And so there's a need for grounding because Gemini is an air sign, you know. Aphrodisiac put over here on TikTok a characteristic and a verb, fly, flying, you know, which would be associated with the air element. Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius. So there's a need to ground, right? Well, you say you have Venus there. I'm not sure where you have. Oh, you have Venus in the third house, but it's in Cancer, so it's still physically in the third house. I see what you mean. So you're approaching, the moon is approaching a Venus for you, not for nothing, and for something at the same time. And it's worth your relations with, like I said, close relatives, also neighbors as well. Also, your ability to have a more appeasing and pleasing and sociable um, demeanor and approach from an astrological perspective because the moon is approaching your Venus. Um, but while the moon is in Gemini, it gives highlight and a focus to all things Gemini. Right now, as we speak, the moon is in Gemini and it's in alignment with the planet Jupiter, which is called a conjunction. And so this is significant wherever Gemini is in your astrological chart. So um, if you have Gemini in the third house by sign and it's the ruler there, then um, the moon and Jupiter actually bring a little bit of benevolence and optimism there and hope, you know, and fortune and abundance, more so abundance because Jupiter is the largest planet in the zodiac, right? So, in addition to the moon in Gemini conjuncting Jupiter, which is a beneficial planet, sometimes it can be too much of a thing. Jupiter is fortune, it's luck, it's opportunity, but sometimes it can go overboard, especially when there are challenging aspects to Jupiter. And so, if you look in the chart currently right now, you'll see that Jupiter is in making a challenging aspect to Pisces with Saturn. We got Mercury, Venus going retrograde in Pisces now, um, Neptune in Pisces, and the node in Pisces. So there's a little bit of tension in regards to the thoughts with what it is that we believe in that's new and different. I say new and different because the sun has activated Pisces a month ago, a little less than a month ago, like only 11 days. So Pisces is still kind of fresh. Even though the sun is not there, it's fresh with light still, because it just lasts left. It's like um, it's like turning the light on and off real quick in your house, and you can still see it. Like takes time to fade all the way away, right? So the light of the sun, right, has transited through Pisces, and it's now in Aries, but it's still it's fading. The energy is still there a little bit. So Pisces was new, and all things new from Capricorn's place, because that's when the days began to get longer. So it's significant there. All right, so the moon in Gemini, um, archetypes and energetics having to do with the mind, the thinking, information, the gathering of thoughts, the processing of our thoughts and information. If you're a Gemini rising or a Gemini sun or Gemini moon, this is significant for you in regards to your mental processing and how you process information and information about yourself and your communication aspects and how you present yourself to the world. If you have Gemini in the second house, you would be a Taurus rising, so you would value words and thoughts and the way in which you process information. It's a highlight while the moon transits Gemini. If you have um, Gemini in the third place, whether you have planets there or not, right, it highlights your moment by moment thoughts and being mindful of them, as well as being more informative in your conversations and or listening for information to others and those that are close to you, because the third house has to do with close relatives, neighbors, in your immediate environment. It's the third house is also associated with Gemini too, so it also has to do with learning and being the student. If you have Gemini in the third house, not for nothing. um, and these are Aries risings. If you have Gemini in the fourth house, then the moon in Gemini highlights and activates your living circumstances and being more thoughtful of your home environment and your roots, mother, grandmother, family, and whole in general. And this would be Pisces risings, is what it would be. You know, your neighbor just invited you over for a block party. You see some of these things, and when you start paying attention to your chart, you start making sense of some of the placements, and especially the transits. And the transits are where the planets are currently located. So if you have Gemini in the fourth house, it's home and family. If you have Gemini in the fifth house, then it's more thoughtful and paying attention to the moment by moment thought processing when it comes to your love life and or your children and or recreation and entertainment. All these things tie into one another, right? Pleasurable pursuits and the thoughts surrounding these things. Um, Gemini in the sixth house has connections to one's health, moment by moment thought processes based on one's health and hygiene. Maybe it's time to do the laundry, per se, or clean a certain area of the house or at work. These would be your Capricorn risings, is what it would be. It would be a focus, and the focus would be for another day. The moon stays in the sign for approximately 2.5 days, believe it or not. Um, Gemini, if you have Gemini in the seventh house, then you would be a Sagittarius rising. And the seventh house is the house of dealing with contracts. So thoughts on a moment by moment basis and processing um, the balance within the equilibrium within relationships, right? The the courtship, right? Notice how courtship, the word shipping of court, or the two people, the engagement with two people, as well as the matrimonial process of getting married and you go to court, or city hall where courts are held and you make it a legal binding agreement, which is the seventh house. And you make legally binding agreements verbally as well as on paper, right? Not for nothing and for something at the same time. But that's interesting. With the moon in Gemini for you Sagittarius risings, you're more inclined to pay attention to the fairness within your relationship um, now for the time being. Gemini in the eighth house, this is the house of shared resources, what your partner's worth and your partner's money or who owes you. Who are these? This would be the um, Scorpio risings, right? It might not necessarily be that somebody owes you. It might be because it's the eighth house. The eighth house is 180 degrees from the second house. The second house in astrology is the house of finances. And so there's a tie between the second house and the eighth house. The second house is your finances. The eighth house is other people's money. So maybe someone loans something to you if and that you're a Scorpio rising, right? With the moon in the eighth house, and or there's talk about the things that you value within that relationship. And Gemini in the ninth house. Gemini in the ninth house. This is for Libra risings. Libra risings, while the moon transits Gemini in your ninth house, you're apt to think about your schooling a moment by moment basis on what you've learned also and sharing that information with others at a deeper level. The ninth house also has to do with um, integrity and noble behavior. The ninth house has to do with wisdom. So you're inclined to pay a lot more attention to how people speak to you as well. Gemini in the 10th house, this is the Virgo risings, you know, apt to think about your career, your reputation, your public image, and how other people see you. This is the public image is the 10th house. The thought processing is Gemini, right? Um, Gemini in the 11th house, this would be Leo risings, suns, moons, and risings, Leo. So, Leo risings are apt to think a little bit more on a moment by moment basis about their friends, their associates, their dreams, and their goals. It's an excellent time if you're a Leo or Leo rising, while the moon is in Gemini too. I say vision board and or jotting down some of the things that um, you would like to obtain or set for yourself in that regard. Um, Especially with Jupiter in Leo, right? There's really a lot of benefit there because things open up, right? And I'm recognizing that because of the fact that Jupiter, an expansive planet, a planet of fortune and luck, is in the 11th house. Also, collaborations is also something that's significant for Leos and Leo risings specifically. Um, and then last but not least is Gemini in the 12th house. Gemini in the 12th house is Cancer risings. Now, interesting that the 12th house is not always looked at as the best place. And you could look at it in a negative limelight and or you can see the positive in it too. You can look at both, right? Because the 12th house is a house of secret sorrow. But it's in our secret sorrows that we find so much potential there, honestly. You know, I make that connection by looking at how the 12th house is associated with hospitals, right? And so I asked myself over the years, what happens in the hospital? How is it? How is a hospital? Well, first, the first 2 hours of your day, I use whole house and equal house system to answer your question. But the first 2 hours of the day by clock time with astrology are the 12th house. And those first 2 hours, for the most part, of course, if you have a different crazy schedule, you third shift or whatever, it might be different. But for the most part, you're still in the bed, you're still by yourself. Even if you're married and you're laying next to your partner, you still are by yourself. You're always by yourself. Um, because the spirit is enclosed in the body. Anyway, that's a whole nother video. We'll get into it another time. But you're by yourself. You're with your thoughts. You're getting ready. Da da da. That's a secret place, right? And that process, that first 2 hours of the day, correspond and connect to the same energy of an individual being in the hospital and recovering from an injury or operation or something of that nature, right? So it's said to be a place of secret sorrow. No one can really see the pain that you're in. They see you laying in the bed. They see you in the hospital just recovering, but no one knows what's really going on with you. When you're sleeping in your bed those first 2 hours of the day, no one really knows, right? It's hidden. It's a behind the scene place, right? Another nature of the 12th house is institutions or correctional institutions, prisons, jails, things of this nature. And not that you're locked up when you're in your bedroom, right? But when you're by yourself or you're in your thoughts in this bedroom like settings or hospital like settings, you have a tendency to think about all the wrongs or the things that you didn't like about what you did, right? And so you look to find ways in which to correct, yourself or your behavior, which in essence connects to the 12th house. And so I said all that to say that last but not least, Gemini in the 12th house, while the moon is in Gemini in the 12th house, or moon is in Gemini by transit, is that your Cancer risings, Cancer sun, moons, and rising signs are apt to think a little bit more about the aspects of themselves that they don't like. They also, I have found that Cancer risings, when the moon is in Gemini by transit, are apt to keep their thoughts to themselves, and it's a struggle, it's a challenge, right? To speak up, to get that, to spit it out. And it's important to recognize the benefit, even if it hurts or it makes you feel uncomfortable. Not for nothing. So I wanted to share that real quick. If you liked the information and would like more astrological insights, be sure to stay tapped in. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Ba-da-bop. All right.